All right, Jeff, let's talk about the wild weather of winter 2022-23. Now, we say it was a wild winter, but do we say that every year? I feel like we say that every year. Was this year particularly bad as far as winters go?
I thought it was pretty crazy. I mean, basically, we had two severe weeks of winter right around Christmas and then in early February. And the rest of the time, winter didn't show up in the eastern part of the country, except, well, the western part of the country saw the opposite extreme. I mean, California got hammered with storm after storm after storm. They're looking at record amounts of snowfall, heavy snow melt going on, flooding. So extremes at both ends of the country. So really wacky winter.
All right, so let's talk about what's to blame for this because we love to blame climate change, but there's a lot of different variables in place here, right?
Yeah, I mean, the weather's extreme naturally. And some of the things that help make weather extreme are the El Nino La Nina pattern that is in the Pacific Ocean. And we saw a strong, well, not a strong, but a medium strength La Nina pattern this winter, which contributed to some of the extremes.
Okay, so what about the rain in California? Because wouldn't La Nina kind of hamper that?
Usually, what happens when you do get a La Nina event is the southwestern US sees lower amounts of precipitation than usual. That certainly didn't happen this year. They got clobbered. And we're kind of scratching our heads trying to figure out, why that happened. And we don't have a lot of good theories. It's going to take some, after the fact research, probably take years to figure out what really happened.
So no theories in place yet as to what different things could be happening here?
You know, the atmospheric circulation has been fundamentally disrupted by climate change. And anytime we see a wacko event like this, that's a prime suspect because the patterns we're seeing now are unlike anything I've seen back in my 40 years as being a meteorologist. I mean, back in the 20th century, it was much more stable and predictable. And nowadays, I'm just kind of saying, oh, we got one of those. I haven't seen that before. And I think climate change has to be responsible for a lot of these extreme patterns we're seeing.
All right, so what about the polar vortex? What role did that play this year?
Yeah, the polar vortex did a split. And when that happens, we tend to get long lasting periods of extreme weather. In particular, the Arctic air to our north can spill down southwards and cause, winter havoc. And we did see that happen this year. Turns out that March is going to be our most winter-like weather month of the whole winter, even though technically it's spring meteorologically. And that's because of the polar vortex split.
So, I mean, you talk about last century and how these were less common, but there were storms. So, we just celebrated the 30th anniversary of the blizzard superstorm of 1993, storm of the century, I guess, if you want to call it that. So we did see extreme events in the 90s, 80s, 70s, correct? They're just less frequent back in those days than now?
It depends on what season you want to talk about. Yeah, as far as billion-dollar weather disasters, we've seen a huge ramp up in the number of billion-dollar events. Part of that is due to the fact that there are certainly more people with more stuff living in harm's way. So there's more disasters simply because there's more to lose. But even in addition to that, I think that we are seeing greater losses because the weather's getting more extreme. So yeah, 70s and 80s, we saw some extreme events, certainly like the blizzard of 93, but we're seeing a lot more of them now, and we're getting a lot more damage, that's for sure.
All right, is there anything we can learn from this winter about what's to come this spring or this summer or next winter?
The La Nina event that's been going on the past 3 years that's been contributing to some of our extremes, that was declared at an end this past month by NOAA. So things are changing. So we shouldn't use what's happened in the past to guide us as to what's in store for us the rest of this year, because we are seeing that fundamental shift in the atmospheric patterns. So all bets are off. There's more heat than ever in the system now, and heat is energy. So that energy can power more intense extreme weather events, and we should certainly expect to see more of those this year.
So if La Nina is coming to an end, what phase are we going into now?
We're in the neutral phase right now, and the forecasts are calling for El Nino to be in place by hurricane season. And that potentially would be good news for the Atlantic because hurricane activity tends to be quieter during El Nino. Now, that doesn't always happen. The last time we had an El Nino, which was back in 2018, the hurricane season turned out to be quite a bit near average, and we saw a Category 5 landfall, Hurricane Michael, in the Gulf of Mexico. So El Nino is not a guarantee that you're going to see a quiet hurricane season, particularly when the El Nino event is just starting, which is what we expect to see this summer.
So because La Nina was winding down, could that be the reasoning for the wet weather in California this winter?
It could be. The circulation pattern has transitioned to more of an El Nino-like pattern, and that certainly brings the jet stream more in line with California's latitude, causing heavier rains there. So it could be an early El Nino type of situation there.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to add?
I certainly hope we don't get a big cold wave coming the next few weeks because spring is coming much earlier than usual over most of the southeast U.S. So those cherry blossoms are going to get going in DC any day now. It looks like it should be near record early. So let's just hope that our early spring doesn't get bitten by kind of a late winter comeback.